That means it's the right one because he turned you
All
off.
right.
He knew to turn you off.
So this is number 6. Ooh, hello. This is my wireless far right side of the board. Hello. Can you turn my gain up slightly? Very top knob. Hello. Hello. Y'all can hear me? Too loud? Not loud enough? All right, you guys want to see a magic trick? I only know one magic trick. All right, watch this. Over here you see a finger on this hand, right? How many numbers? Watch this. Oh, it's on the other hand. Listen, this will keep a preschool class entertained for a solid 5 minutes if you're ever desperate, because it goes back. But sometimes we do addition. So 1 plus 1 is? Whoa, all right. I know, this is like all I got. But if you're desperate and you're thrown into a preschool room, it'll buy you 10 minutes. And if you're like surrounded by 8 preschoolers, like it's all just about survival. There's no like, I'm going to teach these kids something. That's a lie. You just want to survive the experience.
What exactly is this?
Yes. Right now? Oh. All right, everybody, it is 6 o'clock, so we are going to start in 2 minutes. If you need to use the loo or you want to grab a snack, I'm going to encourage you to do that right now. I'm giving you 2 minutes to get rolling and comfortable. All right, well, it looks like most people are in here. I do want to let you know we put some sparkling water out and also stuff. Feel free at any time to get snacks or whatever. We want to have this to be a comfortable space. Our agenda in the past has really been to have some sort of presentation and then follow that up with sort of an intermission and then a panel discussion. And this session has probably had the most discussion, revamps, tweaks, adjustments to it. And so we're, fluid has been the word that I'm using. Like, have you ever tried to hold melting Jell-O in your hand and keep it in some sort of a shape? That has been this evening's adventure and journey. So I just, I invite you to be flexible and sort of to roll with some things. In conversations with some people within the Pride community around Lakewood, it was encouraged that I start with a little bit of history of the church, of why we're even having this conversation. Why are we choosing to have a justice and mercy talk around LGBTQ SW plus community? Gosh, I missed one. Sorry. This is frantic. But this is actually going to be one of the questions. Like, are we allowed to just, at one point, it was just, well, it's the gay community. Well, that wasn't appropriate. Like, and then queer become offensive. And so can we actually just say, is it the queer community? And that seems to be sort of acceptable. But does it let out, like, and this is, as a old white straight dude, like, there's still, like, I need to learn how to speak honestly and authentically in a way that shows value to everybody. And also at the same time when we do other, like, well, what about allies and advocates? And so do we just call it the Pride community? I don't know. I'm going to ask the panel this very question. It's on my list. But this church started, and so we're looking at, with some of the church leadership, we're looking at some archives, trying to decide, when did this church specifically really say, this is an issue we care about. We want to lean into this. We want to learn more. We want to have these conversations. And according to what we've sort of found, it's roughly around 1995, 1996, when a pastor came to this church who had a child who identified as part of the LGBTQIA SW plus community. All right, I got it right. Thank you. And that was one of the original pieces, because there is argument, there's pushback that sort of as a church saying, like, okay, well, you voted to become part of a Reconciling Ministries network. You're doing these things. Like, at the same time, we've received it like, well, you're sort of late to the party. Like, good intentions, but not enough. But This church has, and the word I'm going to use is resiliency around this issue. Because originally, as this church started to have these conversations, there was a little bit of pushback. They were like, well, what will it cost? Will we lose conservative members? And those conservative members are giving members. Like, will there be a financial implication to the livelihood of this congregation? And yes, probably. And yet this church persevered and continued to dive into issues like, no, like inclusion matters more than financial stability. This church changed all of the restrooms to single gender use before the policies changed. Before the church was ever a reconciling organization, they said, we're not going to wait for politics, and we're going to change the building to be more inviting. And so this church continued to be resilient, to press into this issue and not getting it all right. There's no like, hey, look at it. We know there's still things we need to learn. We know there's still things that we stumble upon, but a church that is endeavoring to make sure that there's a safe place for people to experience the divine in our community. In 2024, so this is just 2 years ago, the United Methodist Church is a large global entity, and so that some of the challenge of being a global entity when we vote on issues or policy, our churches in Africa vote, our churches in the Philippines vote. There's different cultures, the different mindsets. It is a global entity, and so sometimes trying to push policy change is really hard. The Western jurisdiction, which is Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Washington, California, and parts of Wyoming, Colorado, has leaned into this more, where bishops have actually been faced church judicial issues. We've had bishops who have supported the LGBTQIA S2+ community, and they have been defrocked. That's a weird word, frocking. I don't understand that. But it means they lose their credentials. You no longer get to actually be a bishop. You no longer get to be a pastor. You lose the privilege of wearing the robes and the vestments because you performed a gay marriage. And within this jurisdiction, they have said this: the inclusion is more important than my garments. It's more important than my identity, my entity, like my livelihood. And this jurisdiction has persevered. We appointed a openly gay, black, married male bishop 3 years ago. We said, I don't care what the policy says. This person is gifted. This person is skilled. This person has gifts. And if you've ever had the privilege of hearing Bishop Cedric, I can listen to him all day. He's brilliant. In 2024, at the General Assembly, the United Methodists removed harmful language that was introduced really in the 80s, 70s-ish, and we watched the movie 1946. It had a lot to do with translation issues and some of that. And this small church continued to say, like, yes, but we're going to be an inclusive and open church. And in the process, we lost members. Families separated on issues. And this church said, we understand that, but this is too important to compromise on. We are going to continue to be an open, inclusive church. Last Palm Sunday, this church voted to become part of the Reconciling Ministries, which says, and this is a conversation I was having earlier today, not just that we're going to welcome people, but we are going to celebrate people. And so this is sort of what I've been carrying just today, is like, what does it mean not to just say, okay, we're going to be a church that welcomes people of every sexual orientation or identity, but what does it mean to actually celebrate every sexual orientation or identity? Because that, to me, is different. That carries I just feel there's more expected of us with that. And I don't know what that means. I shared this earlier this morning, too. I don't necessarily have all the answers. I have a lot of questions, and I want to endeavor into this. But this is a church that has repeatedly and intentionally persevered around this issue. And again, Palm Sunday last year, we voted to become a reconciling ministry. And I don't know if you know much about church politics, but unanimous votes are rare in any church. We want to change the color of the carpets. Well, everyone's going to have an opinion, okay? Like, it was a unanimous vote for this congregation that we want to become part of reconciling ministries. We want to be an open, inclusive space. We want to be a safe sanctuary. It was unanimous, and it is just rare in church politics. And I would love to say that there's no such thing as church politics, but we're an organization and humans are involved. There is. And so last year we ended up, during the summer, we didn't do traditional services here in the sanctuary. We did a lot of roundtable discussions to evaluate what do we want to celebrate about the history of this church, what's important to this church, what are issues that are still important to us. And being open and affirming was one of the issues we said was important to us. But as a small congregation, we also said before we can get behind any issue we say we care about, we have to commit to learning. We need to learn what's going on in the community. We need to learn what's going on within organizations. And so we endeavored with these justice and mercy talks, not as a way to say, hey, we figured it out, but as a desperate plea of saying we need to learn. And we don't have necessarily a lot of human personnel, human resources. We don't necessarily have a lot of money to throw behind an issue, but we have a great space on a very visible road. And so how do we use this space to create awareness and education around issues we say we care about? And so this has been the endeavor. This is sort of what's gotten us here to say we are going to focus on this as one of the things we say we care about. And how do we use our space? How are we intentional about our space? How do we honor everyone in this space, knowing that we have a lot of learning to do? So to start with this, I want to go ahead and invite Debbie Warmington up. Debbie is one of the champions around this issue. She's been one of the leading members and leadership team who has said, we have to become reconciling. She's been the lay leader around this. Go and grab this seat here. And I asked, getting ready for that, I asked Debbie a lot of questions and whether or not she's a presenter or Q&A. And so we decided that should be good for you. We'd start. So I'm going to ask everyone. So also, if you're a presenter, you're coming up here, just so you know. For white, straight people, there's a lot of letters in this LGBTQIA S2+. And so I'm going to ask everyone to just sort of identify where within those letters do you find yourself, just to help us understand a little bit, if we can, and if you're comfortable sharing that. So would you just introduce who you are and your orientation so we understand?
I'm Debbie Warmington. I go by the pronouns she, her. I am a straight female who has many family members who are part of the LGBTQ, and I can't remember how they all go, sorry, community. So that's who I am and where I'm coming from.
So as this church historically has sort of dealt with this and met resistance, like, why has this been important to you?
Because of family members, I have a trans son and cousins. I have several who are part of the gay and lesbian community. So I grew up as that was okay, unlike a lot of people of my generation. And I, especially after my son came out, I felt that it was more important to make sure that the spaces that they might be involved in would be safe, which meant I had to be more involved.
So being a part of this church, which was not maybe always open to that thought process or ideology, why have you stayed? Why have you been a champion of this inclusive call?
Well, I felt it's important to be involved and to push for this church to become reconciling. In fact, I've asked the minister before last if we could start that process. He was not quite ready because the larger church was not quite ready. And then the last minister was willing to, said, okay, let's start the process and see what happens. There's no guarantee. So at that point, that was 2018 and 2019, we started, and we spent the whole summer after church. We had meetings to discuss it. We had I can't remember if she was a psychologist or a psychiatrist, come in and explain the mental health issues, the development issues, and so we did a lot of study then. But then, like 2 weeks before we were due to vote, we had a complete shutdown due to COVID, and that never got back on track again. And then when we were looking for a new pastor, that was one of the things that we told our district superintendent was very important to us, that we wanted someone who would be a champion and would help us complete the process to become a reconciling church and to help lead with that.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking, like, so 3 pastors ago, we're talking about a decade.
Yeah.
If not more. So last year, Palm Sunday, we vote to become a reconciling ministry. It's a unanimous vote. I didn't prep you for this question, but sitting here, I'm just like, what was going on in your mind? You're like over a decade of fighting for something, and you're finally here. What was going on in your mind? What was going on in your emotions?
I was really excited. I thought that we had so many more possibilities, so many more people to minister to if we could get out that we were a reconciling church. I just think that it just lines up so much with my understanding of who Jesus was and the love that he shared. And so that to me was important.
Yeah. This long journey of trying to become an open and affirming, reconciling congregation, like what does that cost? This church, people who've left, relationships within families?
Well, as you said, we did lose some people. And in fact, as we weren't going anywhere after we started opening up again after COVID, and we weren't having the discussions again. Kurt and I were actually looking at other churches. So we were to that point, we were very frustrated. So it really does cost something on both sides, because you lose people if you are not open and affirming, and there are those that you'll lose because you are open and affirming. And I think, though, it's worth the cost.
Yeah. Looking forward, so now we're a reconciling congregation. That's great. We've hung a flag. Okay. What are your sort of hopes for this church, but also what are your hopes for Lakewood and the broader community?
Well, I'm hoping that more people will see that we are here and come to see what we are doing here. And I'm hoping that we will be able to reach more people and let them know that we are loving of them. But for the larger community, I hope that we can reach out and help. I know that there are people, my grandson, who would hope that we would have a space that would be a place that would be safe for teenagers. There isn't one in Lakewood. There is one group over at St. Mary's, but there isn't a continually open space. for people in the community who or the teens in the area to go to, where they can meet each other, they can learn and learn how to, well, I guess when my son came out who he was, it was the language that he was given to be able to talk about who he was specifically. And I think that's very important for teenagers who are on their journey to be able to know who they are by learning what the language is for their community. And so I'm hoping that they'll be able to have a place that would help them.
So not just a safe place to hang out, but also some education, training, support, encouragement,
Yes.
that type of stuff. Excellent. Is there anything around this just journey or where you're at that you want to share sort of beyond that, sort of general open-ended question? One of the best interview questions is always, what did you want me to ask that I didn't ask?
Now you put me on the spot and I can't
Yes,
think
I
of
did.
anything.
Okay.
I can't think of anything.
No, I do think coming in, I've only been here about a year and a half, but I remember that initial meeting where I sort of asked, hey, where are you about this? And just the journey that your family has taken to champion this cause, I think is worthy and honorable. And so thank you for being someone who persisted.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. All right, I'll let you go. I'm going to check my agenda. That has been a whole 1 hour in the making as we adjusted. So in the journey over the last couple of months, really since we started this process, I have gotten the privilege of knowing a variety of people in the Pride community, part of the committees, different pieces. And there's been so many stories that I wish everyone could be a part of to hear sort of the heart and everything, and that's not possible. But Dylan has been willing to share a part of his story and experience he had in the journey that I think sort of bridges the gap between tonight's talk as well as watching the 1946 documentary this morning. And so, Dylan, would you be willing to come up and share your story? Would you like a wireless or do you want to sit? All right.
I'm totally going to sit, though, because these chairs are comfy.
Okay, well then just sit right there and use that microphone, and I don't need...
Can you hear me? Hello. What part of my story did you want? Okay, first of all, I'm Dylan. Hi, nice to meet you. I suck at public speaking. Pronouns he, him. I'm a gay dude from Wyoming. I've been out in Washington for 8 years now, going on 9, and I've been in Lakewood for almost 4 now. So what did you want me to share? Okay, so a little bit of background. I'm not a churchgoer, but I did go to Young Life because it was something to do with my friends in a really small town, and also I had alcoholic parents, so it got me away from them. And it was a lot of fun, and even though I wasn't into the churchier side of it, I still really enjoyed all the people. All the leaders were really cool. They were just really fun to hang out with and very non-judgmental, felt like a safe place to be. Especially, you know, like where else would you want your 16-year-old teenager to be hanging out at, as opposed to like doing street hoodlum teenager stuff. And so like I never really had any sort of bad experiences there. I loved everybody. But I did know that like I didn't really like come out, like I was already out of the closet, but I didn't tell any of the Young Life people just because I had this assumption that I wouldn't be welcome if my sexuality was known. And there was a moment where it felt like that fear was confirmed. I can't even remember the context because this was 15 years ago. But one of the Young Life leaders was on stage talking about sins and was just listing off all of these things, and homosexuality was one of them. And I wanted to get up and storm out. I was angry, I was hurt, I felt like I had been betrayed by these people that I had spent a couple years with, building trust and relationship. I went downstairs, I wrote a very heated, very swear word laden letter basically condemning all of them, and then I left and I didn't come back for probably a couple of weeks. But they did find my note. I just left it downstairs in the basement, and the head of Young Life in Cody, Wyoming, his wife reached out to me on Facebook. She felt horrible. And she said that everybody else felt really horrible. They had no idea that I was gay, and they had never really thought about how some of those remarks could have been seen as insensitive, especially to someone at such a formative age who's still trying to figure himself out, figure his place out in the world. So her husband also ended up messaging me, and this is what actually got me to start coming back, was just the fact that he reached out to me. He didn't even really bring the incident up. I mean, he did apologize for it, but he invited me to lunch. We went to a place across from my high school for lunch, and he bought me lunch, and he just wanted to talk to me and hear about my story and treat me as a person. And he did take responsibility for how what was said was hurtful, and that really did kind of go a long way for me. So there's that story, the Young Life story. Not sure where else to go from there. You can just stream, they'll hear you.
So apparently my batteries are dead, even though I checked them right before this session, and now I can't find other batteries.
Somebody
So,
didn't
there's
prepare.
that. I know, so I've sat around a dining room table and had a couple conversations with you. I guess that question is still like, what are your hopes for this community? Do you see a need to do something, create something, hope for something?
Are we talking just like the local Lakewood community, the LGBTQIA plus the whole thing at large, all of it? I mean, because I do have thoughts on all of it.
Yeah, I think, well, we've had there's opportunities in Seattle and Tacoma, but Lakewood's, we've had conversations about Lakewood lacking, and maybe even just talk about that, if you could.
Yeah, I mean, so really all the stuff to do is in Seattle and in Tacoma to a lesser extent. Pierce County doesn't really have much other than Tacoma. Lakewood doesn't have anything. I know there's queer people here, but there's no designated spaces where it's obviously safe for queer people to go. Coffee shops, bookstores, restaurants, queer-owned businesses, or just queer-frequented businesses. And I just wonder, is that because maybe people still don't really feel safe or welcome to be themselves in those spaces, or just know if there are spaces where they can?
So I guess we didn't prep for this at all, and now I'm putting
No, we
you on the
didn't.
spot. And so you have every right to tell me, no, I'm not answering your questions, and just walk off the stage.
I'll answer anything that you want to ask.
But sort of, so being a gay male in Lakewood and feeling like, man, Lakewood has nothing to offer me or doesn't see me. How does that make you feel? What does that impact to feel like I have to travel in order to be a...
Oftentimes the impact is driving up to Seattle, which, being where I'm from, everything to do is an hour and a half away, so usually that's not a problem. But I feel like there's a whole host of people down here who do kind of get left out, because not everybody wants to drive an hour up to Seattle to go do the gay things. Not everybody wants to make that distance to go meet up with a friend, and a lot of times it is kind of insurmountable. Not everybody has cars or work schedules get in the way, and not everybody's a weekend warrior who wants to go party it up until 2 in the morning either. So I think it's just like the lack of options, and I guess people here kind of get left out, you know? Like, there's a lot of people I haven't met just because they don't go to the other things that I typically go to.
Yeah, I was thinking too, just, so you know about some things so you go to, but what about everyone who doesn't know about those things? Man, I'm looking for someplace, but I don't actually know where to go, or...
I mean, I find out most of the things I find out from friends on social media. I know there's one gay bar in Tacoma, technically two if you count Silverstone. I know that there's the Rainbow Center in Tacoma too, which I think they might have an office here in Lakewood, but I cannot remember. So, I mean, there's semi-close by resources. As far as like social gatherings, like I'm still kind of like, I'm coming out of my social shell. I'm not as much of an introvert anymore, and I'm trying to connect with the world around me more. I just don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that I can't be alone in that. And COVID didn't do us any favors, and all the introverted gays are just still kind of in that mindset. They never really recovered from that.
Yeah. I guess sort of my one pondering question. So historically not a churchgoer, there wasn't sort of this value, so a church not necessarily being open and affirming, there's not a sense of loss. But is there anything that an open and affirming church could do to offer you something that's meaningful?
Definitely some form of community involvement, like you were saying earlier. It's one thing to be welcoming. It's another to celebrate a community or a group of people. And there's lots of different forms that I think that can take. I know, and even though I'm not a churchgoer, I don't think church is inherently bad or anything. I never have. I see the value in community, especially in affiliation with your spirituality. And I know that there are a lot of LGBT plus people that feel that way, but they just don't know if there's a safe space for them to go, or knowing if they have somebody that has their back. So I think just doing little things to extend those olive branches, build that bridge back. I don't know, go to a queer event, or maybe host one, or something. It doesn't have to be big, but just anything that can really show, like, not only you're doing, the lip service thing, but you actually care. And I can tell that that's like where the heart of this is at.
Well, I want to thank you for being brave enough to be in front of these folks. They're scary. Look at them.
I like the blue hair. Not very
but
scary.
Just to share your story, I think it's vulnerable, and to not necessarily historically be a church background person, but to share in a church can sometimes be a challenge for people. So I just thank you for being willing to share the authenticness of your story.
Of course.
In this. We're going to go ahead and invite our panel up, which is going to be Nate, Mitch, and Chris. And in the past, we've done like a real clear designated intermission because we've had a presentation and we've shifted. We're not going to do that. So if you need coffee, go get it. If you need to use the loo, you're on your own. We're just going to continue on. So Chris, if you guys can come and take the stage. Nate, Mitch. I will share. This is totally dead. This is not what's ringing. I'm going to have to find one more microphone, just so you know. And I will say this, as they're coming up, recently Nate and Dylan invited me to go in Tacoma, not Lakewood, a bear social. And a bear is a specific subgroup of the gay community, which typically is bigger dudes. I don't know why I was invited other than my belly's growing. And hairy dudes. And so I'm hairy. I fit that category. And it was just interesting to be in that environment. And I'm going to say this. Churches try to be welcoming. it was so easy for me to be a part of that group and that event. People were welcoming. There wasn't a question. There wasn't a whatnot. They were just like, hey, did you get a name tag? Did you get raffle tickets? Come meet these people. It was so easy to be at this event and to be included. And I sat there just thinking like, we as a church have so much to learn from a Bear event. How do we make it easy to be included? And not just like, oh, you can be here, but like a part of, integrated in, accepted in, and I don't know the answer to that other than I walked away going, oh boy, we got a lot to learn. So I'm going to hand this to you. I'm just going to make sure this is on for you. Wonderful. That is live. We're going to try this one. Kurt, can you try number 5? Make sure it is on. 5. All right, wonderful technology. So before we get going on the panel, if we could start, I'm going to go with furthest to closest. So your name, who you are, pronouns, what your role is in the community, and where you land on the alphabet soup.
My name is Nathan Berkstead. I am a gay bear, and my pronouns are he, they, him. The they is Gloria Day, which one of y'all, you're going to meet her one of these days, and it's going to be wonderful. I help with Lakewood Pride. I'm one of the community organizers, and part of my whole spiel is helping to build bridges. So I'm a community networker, and that's part of what I do.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Davis. You're about to hear a lot of slashes, so be ready. My pronouns are they, them, or he, him, his, whatever fits your fancy. I identify as queer or gay man, whatever which one you want to say. Either one's fine. And I work for the City of Lakewood as the Neighborhood Connections Programs Coordinator, so community engagement. I'm also the Vice President of the Board of the Rainbow Center and also President of Lakewood Pride. So doing a lot in the community.
Thank you.
I'm Mitchell Hunter. I have been a part of the LGBTQ+, because that's all the letters that were when I started, community for long enough. So I used to say I'm one of the few people you'll probably meet that's been every letter of LGBTQ. And so I identify as, my pronouns he, him. I'm a transgender man. Transitioned 24 years ago, I think, just because that's usually the next question that gets asked. I am an advocate and an activist in the queer community. I have worked in the recent past, as a training manager for the LGBTQIA Senior Center in Seattle. So the seniors are the ones that have issue with the word queer, because when they were younger, in the 50s and 60s, that was used as a slur. And many of them were beat to a pulp, so they kind of don't equate the same idea. But queer is a term that we sort of took over and re-empowered ourselves with that word to include more people than necessarily if they wanted to say lesbian or gay. That was just too much. I am just hanging out my shingle, doing my own consulting business in the category of basically DEIB, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. That was erased by the current regime, and so now I am looking for ways to let people know that we are not erased. However, at least when I got up this morning, I think I still had feet. So, thing where from back in the future where they would hold up a Polaroid to see if they still existed. So every morning I get up and look to see if my feet are still here, because technically I've been erased from most of the history that we have, and we're fighting to make sure that that is not the case for very long.
Yeah, thank you guys. And I'm Pastor Stephen. I usually use he, him, y'all. I throw in a little south just to be inclusive. Most of my friends will tell you that I'm straight but a little bit bent. Nate challenged me that the language is actually you're straight with a twist. But then just today you used another descriptor, and I'm like, wait, what is that? I got to figure out something else.
Heteroflexible.
Heteroflexible. So, yeah, we'll figure that one out later. So I know, Mitch, you do a little bit more regionally in areas that has been broader, and then one of the challenges that we really do want to get to just in dialogue is like, okay, but what about Lakewood? Like, what can we do here? What's going on? What's the challenges? But I also think there's value in the broader experience, as well as you have been in a faith community for a long time. And so I think there's just so much to glean from what you share in this time. But if I can direct the question to you two, being more Lakewood, let's start with the question of what are the challenges that the LGBTQIA S2+ community faces in our neighborhood and in our community?
I can go first. I think one of the ways to really look at this, Lakewood is very much in the closet, as we have a vibrant queer community that is not out, and there is very little public spaces for us to be able to show up in our authentic selves. I think that's one thing, like Dylan was talking about. Like, you can go to Capitol Hill and you can hold hands walking down the sidewalk with your partner and feel safe and feel like there is a place to that. That's not the way it works in Lakewood. Like, you don't see a lot of same-sex couples being able to express themselves openly. There isn't any, like, you don't have the coffee shops, you don't have the bookstores. There isn't any place that you can just go and let the mask down and just be you. And I think that's one of the things I would really love to figure out is how do we build those bridges in Lakewood so we can have that space to just breathe, you know. So I think it's just, you know, it's that it feels like we're in 1985. That's the best way I can describe it. Like, we're on the cusp of something great coming, but we're still kind of behind the times here.
Kurt, can you take wireless microphone 2 on the very top knob and just turn it counterclockwise a little bit?
I would concur. I agree. I think in Lakewood, there's kind of this best way to explain this without being problematic.
We welcome problems here.
But I also represent the city, so I'm trying to be on my P's and Q's. I think there's this kind of, like, I feel like the youth a lot have been really vocal about what they need and what they want in Lakewood, and being like, there needs to be spaces for LGBT folks in this community. And even looking at it, a lot of people doing the activist type of work in this community are part of the LGBTQ community, right? They're out there, they're running food banks, they're doing things that are in this community that are supporting a lot of people, but don't get that acknowledgement. And so I feel like there's this two ways where you have people that are living by the lakes, I'm gonna say, living by the lakes, who have the privilege and the likeness of being like, this is what I want Lakewood to be. And then you have everyone else who's like, I'm living in Lakewood, this is what I want this is what the support and stuff that I need. So there's like this kind of dichotomy between those two. When I first got this job at Lakewood, I got on Facebook, there was a lot of hate around me having this position of being a coordinator in the community. I got a lot of hate around just one being me black and two being me gay. And it was like, oh, they're gonna toxicate Lakewood. This is gonna be a person that's not gonna do right. And, I still interact with those people today. But I do think the spaces are needed. I do think there's like a lot more community that is here. Like there's a lot of queer people that are here doing great work to support everyone in Lakewood, and they're not getting acknowledged. They're not having that space, but also getting acknowledged that like, hey, they are literally in Steilacoom. We have executive director Jesse Black, who's a queer man that's out here supporting a lot of low-income folks in that area. So it just I feel like locally, it just needs to be a lot aware that, with Lakewood Pride, we're trying to get people more visible, those spaces being out there, but also acknowledging to other half of Lakewood that like there's been people doing amazing work here that's not getting the acknowledgement, and that also needs to happen.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I guess I wish the community at large would know, especially meeting Nate and Jesse, who you mentioned. Sometimes there's just false narratives we have that like, oh, well, gay people only care about gay issues. And in my conversation with the Pride community, it has been like, man, we care about food insecurity. We want our neighbors to not feel isolated. And there's never this like, well, we want our gay neighbors to not feel isolated. The rest of you can screw off. Like there's this genuine care for human beings because human beings matter. And your letter on the alphabet is not what matters. You're a human being, therefore you have value. And this engagement with social issues, social causes, social justice I think we're lacking celebrating that. I think we're lacking acknowledging the contribution that the LGBTQ community is having in our community as a broad, large spectrum, because maybe we're uncomfortable with it or we don't know what to do with that narrative. So, Mitch, you are not part of Lakewood. You're more engaged in Seattle, but on a broader spectrum within the Pacific Northwest, what do you think the queer community, Pride community sort of needs, or what other challenges still facing us sort of regionally?
Oh, when we talk about gathering together, it becomes sometimes, I think we were talking about this, a little bit of a both and. The community really does need a safe kind of sanctuary space where we can just be ourselves, just like Nate said, kind of let our hair down, take our hats off, kick our feet back.
How far does your hair go down, Mitch?
Yes. Wait. There you go. There's the gay flip. And I am in the Seattle men's chorus, so I do know how to flip. I think it's important for us to have those spaces and to really kind of enjoy those spaces, but at the same time, if we don't get out and integrate with everyone, then we're also like, we don't want to be isolated and stuck in the side. Talk about United Methodists. This is kind of very something for me, seeing the symbol there. I grew up a United Methodist in Austin, Texas. So when I was 11, the first thing that I ever heard about homosexuality, and I knew that I was different when I was a tomboy growing up there, was I was 11 and they passed this thing that said that homosexuals could go to church, but they needed to be segregated in their own Sunday school classes. So they had to go in a separate room. And I think, I just flashed on that when we were thinking about this segregation. it is true, the people that I know that are part of this community are, I just went to the Capitol this week. I was lobbying about immigrant issues, about people that were too scared to go out of their houses or send their kids to school or go to the grocery store. We talked about anti-masking for those officials, I won't call them legal, that are going around and doing things. So it's like we're more alike than we are different. We're just humans. So we have all the same issues to talk about. And so I think this, the needing of private space, yeah, we do. We have our own languages. We have our own celebrations and holidays and things. But at the same time, we need to find ways to be able to bring that out with everyone and let everybody else celebrate with us.
I would love to tag on to that. When you were talking about we have our own
It's still on. I turned the gain down so we didn't get as much feedback.
So one of the things that you were talking about, that we have our own languages and our own celebrations and our own holidays. As straight allies, be willing to watch our movies. Be willing to look at our literature and the way that we talk. And don't look at it as a filter of, oh my gosh, this is queer or gay stuff. I don't understand it. We have all had to learn to communicate with you and use your languages and your holidays. And one of the things that would be really beneficial is to have some humility and some questioning mindset, to be willing to step into our world and be able to sit. And some of our movies are very uncomfortable. You're going to hear and see things that you didn't know was possible with the human body and how we express love and how we communicate. But that's not invalid. And that's one thing that I would highly encourage every one of you to start getting curiosity among the queer community. And so much what has been painted as good versus bad. There's this dichotomy that is put on everything that I don't think is correct. I think it's a lot of straight washing. It's a lot of rhetoric that has been pumped into our society. And when you are willing to pause and say, I'm willing to learn something new about a group of people that I don't know anything about, and put on curiosity, put on a questioning mindset of, these are my neighbors, these are my my siblings, these are my coworkers, and what they bring to the table is really valuable. One of my coworkers, amazing coworker, just 2 weeks ago was like, Nate, I learned a new word, twink. And I'm like, oh my God, Queen, yes, please, tell me more. And she was like, all my girlfriends were talking about the twinks and how awesome they are. And I had never heard that word, and so I asked, what is a twink? And I got a full exposition on what a twink is. If you don't know what a twink is, I would recommend that you Google it. So.
Yeah, I think so.
But
my next
what
question.
What about the twunks?
Twunks, hello.
My follow-up question, which you sort of like led into it, we talked about the challenges in the Lakewood area and the community as large, is what can we do, like what does support actually look like? And so you're saying support looks like educating ourselves, exposing ourselves to stuff that's beyond, learning. I use the term acclimate a lot because I'm more of an outdoors hikey guy, and so when you're outdoors, you have to, if you're going to survive in an environment that isn't necessarily friendly, you have to acclimate to it, like oxygen level, and so exposure and engaging to increase our awareness is a part of it. But what else can support look like? And I'm going to be specific because I get this question a lot, follow up from some of our Justice and Mercy. Like, there is, sure, support is a whole broad community, but like what is support? Like, we're a small aging congregation. What can we actually do to make a difference? And then also, what can individuals within Lakewood do? So what does support look like? Chris, I'm going to let you.
Yeah, I will say the thing that probably Nate will probably not say. Money. Lakewood Pride is a new organization, and we definitely need money. So definitely.
I will, just to brag about, we were the first faith sponsor for Lakewood Pride.
Yeah.
Not that it was a lot, but like, we're in this.
Yes. So I think money. I mean, Lakewood Pride is definitely trying to start their first kind of festival-like thing on August 15th. So money.
August 15th, in case you didn't hear that and put it in your calendar.
Yes. It'll be with Summerfest, it'll be a little Pride festival on the side of it at Fort Steilacoom Park. So where Summerfest usually is, we'll be there. We'll have a good section of space that we'll have for Lakewood Pride for this year.
Yeah, so with that money, one of the things that I heard, Nate and I, we were talking today, is the city has very specific requirements about their pop-up tents that can be in this thing because it has to line up and whatnot. So they need a very specific 10 by 10 pop-up tent. So if you don't want to just give money, like, I would invite you to buy a tent for Lakewood Pride. It needs to be 10 by 10. Talk to Nate because it has to be a certain brand to meet city requirements, whatnot. But that would be a tangible way to say, I'm in, I support this.
Yeah. I also would add just offering, I think additional support could be if you know spaces that we could, where I usually just say queer community, so I'm going to say queer community. Sorry, y'all.
That was actually one of my questions because I've been
okay,
trying to, like, I've been
queer.
tripping over the letters.
I just say queer.
And a lot of people, like, there's too
Somewhere
many
that
letters
comes
now.
up.
Can we say queer community and that's not offensive? Do we say the
you
gay
know.
community? Do we say the pride community? Like, how do we talk better?
It really does depend on who you ask. I just say queer community because it's easier for me. I say alphabet mafia sometimes. It really depends on what one you want to go with.
Alphabet soup, that we use
right.
that too. The
Yeah.
I
Rainbow
thought that was just like
Connection.
ATF,
The
FBI.
big tent community. So, you know.
It really depends.
It really comes down to your intent on how you ask it.
Yeah.
There are people who, they roll their eyes, oh my God, it's the alphabet soup. I mean, it's just like, no, that's not respectful. It really comes down to your heart and your intent. Yeah. The majority of the people, we are willing to work with you. We recognize that we bring a very diverse rainbow of letters to everything that we do. We are a verbose people group. We like words.
I've been leaning towards, but I've been leaning towards Pride community only because the Pride community includes the allies and advocates. But I also don't want to diminish anything. And so if, as a straight male white pastor dude who has gray hair uses the word pride, like, is that okay, or should I lean more towards something else?
I don't know. I mean, for me, I think there needs to be distinctions between allies and people in the community. I think there needs to be that distinction. I haven't heard the term pride community before. That's a new one for me.
I may have invented it.
You might have. That's a new one for me. But I do think there needs to be some distinction.
So queer community would be better received than pride community.
Well,
For me, but I mean,
I'm going to say historically that there's,
yeah.
as long as you kind of, if you start the alphabet, if you at least acknowledge it, because even within our own community, this is a big conundrum. It's a big thing we argue about. We talk about it. Whether or not the A got in there was this big, huge thing. So, yeah, I'm going to start.
Asexual.
2S is Two-Spirit. That's within the indigenous communities. It does not necessarily relate to your sexual orientation, although people use it that way, but it actually is more about gender. So there's two things that are in the alphabet soup. There's sexual orientation and there's gender identity. And some letters refer to both, and some refer to either or. So Two-Spirit is actually about gender identity. L, lesbian. G, gay, usually referring to men. Bi is B. Now people are inventing all kinds of highfalutin ways to say that, but in the old days we just said bi. So that's sexual orientation, whether you're sexual with men and women and or others. And T is transgender or non-binary, so it's kind of an umbrella term, as long as you qualify it that way. Q is for queer, or in the old days also questioning, people that aren't really sure yet where they are. So Q people use for both sexual orientation and gender identity because it's less binary for some people. I is intersex. In the old days, people used the term hermaphrodite. That's not cool. You can't use that term anymore.
I learned that today.
Yeah, so it's intersex. And A is for asexual. And some people in the early days thought it was for allies. And so, but it pretty much has been decided, I guess. I don't know who the police is, but we don't, I don't know. It's
And
asexual.
clarify asexual for people who don't know what that means.
It's a sexual orientation in which I say that I am not interested in being physically sexual. I could be, there is a whole classification of more than 10, but I know that demisexual is one of them. That means if I'm saying underneath this A, and if I'm demisexual, it means I need to get to know you better as a person, a friend, a connection. My connection to you is first and foremost emotional and within a friendship connection. So demisexual, that may mean that it leads to physical intimacy. It may or may not. So there you go.
And regardless of gender.
That's for the that's
Yeah.
for the trainer in me.
All right.
So
So
the
hopefully
other-
there's a little bit of education in there and more confusion. All right,
Yeah,
we are going to do Q&A at the end, but yeah, so the statement was that, just an affirmation that human sexuality and gender is a complex thing, and the alphabet soup is a way to make sure that everyone is identified and valued. And this, what all the letters mean, hijacked the question of what does support look like in Lakewood? Or the broader community. Mitch, if you want to jump in.
I was just going to chime in. You were talking about spaces, and I think that's really important. And you had said specifically for a smaller, community here, you do have a lot of space. You have an amazing amount of space. At times that it's not being used by other organizations, I know that you do rent out space or have space available for other folks. It would be really cool. I found out you had a food bank here. What about a space to collect library for books? A lot of people are new or are questioning in their sexuality or their gender, or just want to learn more, like, hey, there's some books out there if you want to learn more about us. There's movies, there's DVDs. So I'm going back. You mentioned it's kind of like 1985. I'm going back. I've actually lived that, so I'm going back to the kinds of things we did to build community during that time. And one thing that we did was we gathered for support groups, we called them. So it's just talking, it's peer level, that kind of thing. We also had libraries where we could share the books that were out there because not everybody had the capacity to buy books at the time. So yeah.
Yeah. Can I, I like action points. So, Lisa, I'm going to look at you as one of our leaders. Sorry. But we've been talking about doing just a public little library thing, but can we what would it look like to have an in-house resource library? specifically around that? Where would we put it? How would we do? Can I just, if I don't capture it, so I call this fugitive information. I have an idea and then it escapes me, and now it's a fugitive and I have to go try to find it. So this is just me trying to capture fugitive information from my head and put it on you. Yes.
I think we need a queer resource library that has fiction, nonfiction, the music, the movies, the history, and then to be willing to be able to use this space to show some of the queer movies, the history. You know, there's a lot of education that can be done, being able to understand the media behind the queer community.
Yeah, I agree. I guess the other way of support, I would say, on a city level would be for maybe people in this group to advocate more to city council about what queer people need in this city. There's not a lot of representation at all on the city level about people talking about what's needed at the city. The city does a little bit of, like, they do a proclamation on June about Pride, but that's about it. So I think if more people speak at city council about, like, hey, there's queer community here, we need this, like, we want more than just like a little proclamation, I think there could be a lot going with that as well.
I'm going to tag on to that. There's a process in Seattle we called safe neighborhoods, or safe project, or safe space, depending upon what year you got in on it. It was actually a process from the police department where we went in and trained the LGBT, at the time, no Qs yet, but the LGBT commission went in and trained with the police department. And so they created safe space, which meant you signed a document that said that you would create a space where if at any point someone was having some issue and needed somewhere to run into a door and say, someone's following me, there's an issue, will you please call the police? And is this a safe space? And one of the ways that the police department went out and trained people in the community and businesses was you got this little decal if you signed up for these things that said that you would be willing to be a kind of a sanctuary space. And up on Capitol Hill, our somewhat erstwhile, gay community. I mean, we have community everywhere, but on Capitol Hill, there was a lot of violence at the time with folks, especially drag queens and performers that were in the clubs late at night, and they would get out of the club, oftentimes still in their performer makeup or their drag makeup, and they had cars or Ubers or Lyft ordered, and people would come up and see them and drive off because their own personal culture was one that they couldn't abide by that, even though they had a professional job. And so we had folks out on the sidewalk in drag at 2, 3 in the morning, and then they were just subject to being beaten up by people that would just come by and look for something to do. So there's safe space. There's also, but part of that was indicating, a business could indicate, I am that sanctuary by putting this little window decal up. So I would say businesses, if you connect in your community and you go and you have your nails done somewhere, check in and see, would it be okay if if a man came in here and got a mani-pedi, is that cool? Are you okay with that? If so, if you could just maybe put something up in your window, something rainbow in the window is usually a signal that we look at to see if this is okay here without having to go in and say, can I come in here? Is that all right?
I want to tag on to this. This is something that you can help Lakewood Pride with. Um, one of the things that I am in the process of trying to do is get in front of the local businesses in Lakewood and see who are our safe allies. And I have cool decals that I just got printed. We have the stickers. We have all of that. But if you, as you are visiting these businesses, if you could just ask, like, are queer, is this a safe space? Are you guys queer friendly? And then get a hold of me, and that would be great, so that we can follow up.
Yeah, as a church, it's sort of interesting because we voted to become reconciling, so we're going to be open, affirming, and welcoming. But we also felt like we needed this, like, how do we let people know? And so there's been some intentional efforts by us, and yet at the same time, people are like, well, like, sure, we're welcoming and everyone can come, but like, why do you need to put rainbow flags up on the window? And some of this is just, like, this is silly. This is the way things go. We were doing the movie, and we're like, wow, do we need blackout curtains for the movie so we can see it better? And then my brain is like, well, why blackout curtains? I'm pretty sure we have every color of the rainbow in plastic tablecloths. Like, these are not pretty flags, people. These are all dollar store, different color tablecloths. And I'm like, well, as opposed to blackout curtains, what if we put the flag up? Because and we had every color but orange. We had to go buy orange. And then, but some of that intentionality of, like, but how, it's that, I guess it's publicity, but it's more like, and I just want people to know that they could come here. And yet there has been a little bit like, well, can't we be open and affirming and maybe not so loud about it?
Yeah, signaling. Well, it's kind of like saying you can come to our Thanksgiving dinner and maybe even bring that same gender, lover of yours. However, can you not talk about it? Well, what am I going to talk about? What were all my vacations and what do we do? And what am I supposed to talk about?
So, Mitch, tell me about what's going on in your life. No, don't say that. I will prepare a script for you. Response, there was an initial response. I don't know if you want to share. Why do we need to be so loud about it? What's the point of that? Can we not be quiet and still be supportive?
No. Well, I mean, I was just going to say, like, the queer community is this very dynamic community. And for so long, we have been told to be quiet. We have been told to stay in your boxes, to stay in your place. And the thing is, we really do bring life to every situation that we walk in. There is this joy, there is this freedom that when we are given the opportunity, we just light the room up. And I think it's like, why do you want to put a bushel over us? Why do you want to hide us? Like, why do you want to take the color out of the picture that we are here to put in?
Nobody wants to look at a black and white rainbow.
It'd be grayscale. Still, no.
I would agree. I think for churches specifically, I think religion has been a huge barrier for a lot of queer people. So having to be overt about, yes, we're here to support the queer community, we're here to support this, I think is really needed, especially in this space. Yes.
So let me ask this question. Like, I don't know that we've been subtle. At least I haven't tried to be subtle. We've had flags stolen, whatnot. Like, are there? How can we be louder, better? You got tips for us?
I would say let queer people come in and help you with your church. Like, let us help you with your music. Let us help you with your art.
Listen, we have been inviting music for a long time, and you know that. Like, don't tease me about music.
I would say give people who are spiritually queer the ability to express themselves openly. Like, if you believe that queer people have the divine Spirit of God within them, then let them bring that Spirit into the room. And also understand that there is a lot of spiritual trauma that needs to be addressed. I think if there was even a way to have a formal recognition of the spiritual trauma that has happened in churches, to let people come and grieve, to let people come in and let them express their anger and their disappointment of being ripped out of positions of leadership in churches and being dragged out in front of the entire congregation, to let them express how they had no opportunity to close relationships that they had built for decades within the body, and they were amputated, and there was no Novocaine. There was nothing that prepared them for what was coming. There is an ugly truth that is here, and I think Lakewood has an opportunity to stand up and say, we are going to be the icebreaker that goes through the religious trauma into something that has healing, but it's going to be a really uncomfortable point when you go through that initial breakthrough point. But we're not going to stop, and we're not going to be quiet, and we're not going to be pacifists about it, but we have to be willing to let that truth, like there's an element of truth of there are so many beautiful queer people that at these Bear socials, I've had youth pastors, I've had worship leaders, I've had people who have been faithful people within the churches. They came out authentically to their truth, and their families are gone, their jobs are gone, their position with the church all gone. And nobody came alongside of those men and women in that moment with healing or with any type of hope. And so there is callousness, there is a lot of resentment, there is a lot of spiritual trauma. So I think as this church, for people to be willing to hold that holy tension of what has happened in the past and what we have as a potential hope for the future, and recognizing that we are here in this present moment. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that I have found is just naming religious trauma, because, well, it's the church and the church is good, so there can't be anything bad. Like, how dare you say that church or religion harmed someone? And so I am by no means an expert, and I mean, I did a program with the Franciscans and training around spiritual direction, and one of my additional certificates is in religious trauma. So it's something I'm like leaning into, and yet, like, even though like, oh, I got a certificate I can hang on my wall, I don't feel like I know anything. Other than what I have found is that, like, thank you for just acknowledging that. Like, thank you for acknowledging that religious trauma is a thing that exists, and being willing to talk about it, even if it's early formation stages. Chris, you started to respond. I'm gonna. No, okay.
I wanted to indicate that the trans community has specifically suffered alongside everyone else with this spiritual trauma. I will say that it took me, after being, they tried to exorcise the gay out of me at a fundamentalist church that I went to. It took me another 18 years to be able to connect back to any kind of spirituality that I could feel comfortable with. And when I did, it was because I was practicing music with a queer chorus called Seattle LGBT Chorus. And we were rehearsing in the spiritual community that I go to now, Seattle Unity. We were rehearsing in the chapel. And we were asked to come on a Sunday and sing our repertoire. And we said, are you sure? Because it's really gay. It's like, we sang this song.
Not sort of gay, but really gay?
I mean, like, some of my best friends are straight, that was one of our songs. So some of my best friends are straight.
Okay.
And we were like, are you really sure? Of course, our director was from the theater community, so he was like, yeah, let's do it. And they said, look, we know that some of you have trouble even rehearsing in a church. And if you have trouble and you don't feel like you can stay for the whole service, walk down the aisle, sing when y'all are singing, and leave. We're fine with that. You can sing whatever you want, right? And it was during that time that they said we could sing with their choir, and they sang a song that I used to lead worship in 20 years before. And that's how I got reconnected to spirituality and found my way back. And I think for the trans community, it's really important to find a place, to find a time where we could, you said it so beautifully, do just that. Be in our trauma, allow us time to get back, be with people who've had similar experiences, learn to trust, grieve. I've never heard anybody talk about that, and that's really a big part of it. And, you know, that's what you are as a spiritual community, so this seems like it would be kind of right in line.
I feel like I could just keep talking to you guys all night. But I want to be a little bit mindful of time. But I do want, one of the things that have come up in a lot of questions is realizing that, so we're a smaller church, we're leaning into this, but we still need to learn more. We need to learn how to be better allies, advocates, accomplices. We talked about that word. So what, in terms of education, like what education can we be a part of? Can we bring? What do we need to learn as a church? If we can sort of address, like what advocacy education sort of is needed or next steps for us?
I think one of the things that would be really critical is just having some sort of DEI training here, like a formal training session, just so that everyone can have shared language, that we can have shared understanding of where we are at as a community, having it between straights, allies, and the queer community. We're all around, round tables. I think that would be really beneficial. I think breaking bread together, having a meal together, having the ability to come and just, this is my fellow human, and we are just going to continue to build community, and it's not about trying to figure each other out. And sometimes life is hard and life is busy, and sometimes everyone needs the ability to just come in, have some good music, some good food, lower the lights down, and just find a new friend. I think if we could create that type of spiritual atmosphere, it would be incredibly healing to move this forward.
I'll add on to that. I think also it's the action piece as well. So like supporting the local, LGBTQIA plus organizations. That's like Oasis and Lakewood Pride here in Lakewood. And also, as I said before, going to city council and just speaking about like, hey, there's like, how can the city really support this community here? I think it's really powerful, especially in Lakewood. So I say that, and I agree. I think having some more spaces where allies and queer folks can come together and talk and it'll be great. And education, you can get education from that. You're learning twink and all these other new terms. I don't fit into that category, but like there's
Heteroflexible. Is that the word? Yeah, that's the one I learned today.
I don't fit into that either. But but that's great, right? Great language and slang is all there too. So
I think when I was talking about trans folk, an interesting statistic when I do training similar to what you're looking for is that they are trans people, according to the last two trans surveys, national surveys, are going to churches and being involved in spirituality in some form or fashion to the tune of 34%, whereas if you compare that to the L's, the G's, the B's, and the Q's, it's only about 21%. So that's interesting. That means there's opportunities to provide space for trans and non-binary folks in particular. And I think the training does have to be broad in DEI, but I will say people used to come to my organization and say, oh yeah, we want that LGBTQ training that you do. I said, oh, okay. And I said, so what specifically, what are you having some issues or questions around so I can customize that for you? And they were like, well, really, we're okay with the gay stuff. We just need to know about that trans and non-binary things, and we don't know about they, and why do we have to say they, and they is supposed to be singular. And so, you know, it would just, okay, gotcha. So specifically, even within that umbrella, I think a lot of exposure and some ideas about language and respectful language and how to carry on with the trans and non-binary community would be great.
Yeah, so what I want to invite people to do is sort of, Nate is representing Lakewood Pride, and if you want to look like, how do we support that more in the community? When we're done, either follow up with him or, I mean, there's a lot of questions immediately afterwards. It might be schedule a coffee or whatnot. Connect with Chris around especially city council, advocacy around that. If you have questions, what does that look like? Times, places you can actually show up. And then Mitch is more in the training category. And so if you have questions around that or specifically around the trans community, to connect with him. We have one more interview to do tonight before we sort of dismiss. And so first of all, thank you guys for being on the panel, asking great questions. I know you've also, you've induced questions in my head that I now have to go and figure out what to do with. And so I think that's a great conversation also. So thank you guys for just being here and being willing to share. Abby, do you still want to come up and be interviewed? Well, then come on up. And I'm gonna just, I want you right here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I promise you that was the chair. We tried to get non-squeaky cushions because they do that to people. So Abby, if you would be willing to start by just introducing yourself, let us know your age because you look younger than the last people who are up here. And as well as just asking if you can identify yourself in the alphabet soup for whatever you feel comfortable.
Yeah, so I'm Abby Bergstedt. You might know my father.
It happens to everybody.
I'm a lesbian. I'm cool like that. My pronouns are she, her. Possibly to change. We're working on it. I'm 11, gonna be 12 eventually. And I feel like I'm missing something.
I think that's good. So 11, identifying on the lesbian queer, because queer is also questioning whatnot. We sort of discussed that. And your dad is one of the coordinators for Lakewood Pride.
Both of them, actually, because I'm cool like that.
Yeah, so both Nate, Dylan, and Chelsea, and that's a whole family structure beyond that. And I think one of the interesting things, just I got to have pizza with you guys for lunch today, sort of in your home. Y'all, not you guys. I got to get better at saying this is one of my acknowledgments. I say you guys a lot still, and I want to say y'all instead of you guys. So I had lunch with y'all, and it was interesting as a younger person, especially being around a family that is so supportive around the Pride community, queer community. Like, your perspective was a little bit different from some of us older people. And so one of the questions specifically, do you feel like there is a good representation of the LGBTQI S2 plus community in this area?
Yes, I feel like the queer people do a good job of representing themselves. I feel like it could be better, though, from the straight allies' point of view.
Yeah, so growing up in a home with people who are championing this, you sort of like, well, I'm around your perspective. You're around people who support this all the time. Does yours, as you interact with people at school or sports team, do you think that your perspective differs from some of your classmates or other people in the city of your age?
Yes, I think so.
All right, does it create any tension as you're in school or sports or?
Depends on the people, by far.
So you find some people who are supportive and some people who are, let's just use the word opinionated?
Yes. Very opinionated.
How is that for you personally? If you engage someone who's very opinionated, like, where does that leave you feeling? How are you reacting?
It depends on the interaction. Sometimes it's pretty crappy and I need mental time after. But, which is why it's really important to support queer youths and as well as adults.
Yeah. So you said you need mental time out. What does that look like for you?
I go sit on top of my roof and I think with music.
Yeah. It's actually where I found her as I pulled into the house. She was sitting on the roof of their place, just sort of detached. And it was completely safe. There was guardrails and stop.
It's called a gutter, actually. It's a gutter.
But yeah, so space for that. What would it look like if there was space within Lakewood that was very specific and over the top, like you knew this is a safe place I can go and be, and I'm going to be around people that are supportive? What would that look like or feel like for you?
So at my school we have a club and it's called QSU, Queer Student Union, and that is a place where I can go and be with other queer people and have fun. We watch movies, we play games, but that's not open all the time, and having a place like that would be very useful for other people also.
Yeah, so it's not open all the time. How often is that available to you?
Every Monday.
So every morning?
Monday.
So one day a week you can find support.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, listen, I'm just going to tell you all old people, we got to do better than that. All right? I'm also opinionated sometimes. My opinion is we got to do better. Harrison Prep, so
Yeah.
Clover Park School District.
Yeah, down there.
And I know, so your family has been in church in the past, have had leadership roles, has not been to church, whatnot. What, as we talk about specifically a church trying to figure out its way in being supportive of the LGBTQIA S2 community, like when you hear that, like there's this church and they're trying to do things, like what goes on in your mind? What questions formulate or hopes that you may have?
So, some questions that I feel like, why did they decide to do this? And you guys answered that like towards the beginning. Some hopes are like they have groups, they have other queer people, because like that's important to have people that you can they are the same as you. I forgot how to say a word. That's A-okay. Yeah.
So identifying with people, a sense of belonging, togetherness.
Mm-hmm.
If you had sort of one tip, and maybe not for an organization as a church, but like if you were to encounter, say, an old person, and you had one tip for said one old person around making sure that you felt safe, valued, what would it be? We also didn't rehearse any of these questions, and she is like flying off the cuff here. So can we just acknowledge an 11-year-old on stage answering these questions? Yeah, so what tip would you have for those old people out there? I'm young, but the others.
You're young?
In my mind, I'm 25.
Interesting.
That's sort of what my wife says. All right, stop. Back to tips. Tips for us.
I don't know.
All right, while you think, there's a question. Oh, hold on. Oh, absolutely. Come on up.
I love your outfit. It's
All right, this is on. Go and grab a seat. Just when you both talk, so the mic, if you could hold it so it's like only an inch away, it picks up, and there are some people watching online. So would you introduce yourself? I know you have a history a little bit with this church. So who you are, what your connection is, and then where on the alphabet soup do you identify?
So I am Adam Boyne, and Deborah is my grandmother. I used to go to this church like more when I was a child. Not really now, but I do want to get like back to it, into it and stuff. But I am a transgender male. I started transitioning 1 to 2 years ago. And I'm 13, and I actually go to the same school as you, so yeah, that's basically it.
All right, so do you have an answer for the question? What tip would you give those old people around how to support youth who are in the queer community?
I think looking into it more, or like even telling them, like, I guess telling them about the sexualities and genders and like stuff like that can help them a lot.
So education,
Yeah.
Okay.
And especially helping them like learn how you identify too.
So identification. What would, if we were to actually transform, because we have a room that we're sort of saying, okay, this room is available to sort of be repurposed, and we were to create space, and space has been one of the things that has been dialoguing a lot, as well as with the older panel. If we were to create space that was safe, encouraging, friendly, full of life, full of joy, what would that look like? What would it mean for the community? How could we make that a usable space? Is that too big of a question?
No.
Off the cuff with no preparation? I'm good at asking those kind of questions.
we can tell.
What would make that space feel comfortable for you?
You need more flags.
So we need more flags. All the flags. So we need to be louder about the intention of that space.
You can never be loud enough when it comes to supporting queer people.
All right. I don't know that anybody heard that. Could you say that louder into the microphone?
You can never be loud enough when it comes to supporting queer people.
Yeah, you can never be loud enough when it comes to supporting queer people. I don't know. If you got nothing else to take away tonight, like, write that down. Done. Mic drop. We're out of here tonight. Adam, so you came on late. What challenges do you feel like you have faced, or what has been hard things to navigate for you?
I think it's definitely most at school. There are a few more people supporting, like, say, lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual, etc. But it's not really as much for people with different gender identities, like gender fluid, intersex, transgender, stuff like that. I think that's difficult because I only know very few people, I think like one or two people that do or is transgender at my school, so I guess it's kind of hard to have more friends like you, or especially like transgender friends and stuff like that. But in the terms of like sexuality, I guess it's more like accepted at the school, but it, like you said, it depends on who you talk to a lot.
If you're okay with being friends with the 11th graders, I know a few.
Is there anything else like you just on the top of your mind that you would like to share with this group?
During like the whole entire thing and when my grandmother came up, I think opening something that could help non-binary and transgender people, because at least I really haven't found any shops with like binders, trans tape, packers, and like stuff like that. I don't really know what it would be for like trans female stuff. But I think having like a shop or like someplace where you could also get like information about that stuff would be really nice to have.
A bookstore shop combined.
Yeah. And it's one of the things I've heard a lot, is specific, like a queer bookstore that had resources as well as information, education. So, yeah, again, looking and evaluating our space, I don't know necessarily what all we can do, but gosh, let's be creative. Let's think about our space. Let's be free with our space and creating something that supports every human being, because every single person that is created with the breath of the divine, right? The same breath that formed Adam and Eve breathed into them, and that means that same breath is in me, which means we are all siblings, we are all family, we are all human beings together, and that's just something I deeply believe. And so how do we support everybody and not just some people? I'm going to encourage you, as we sort of wrap up tonight, think about next steps for you. What is something you can actually do in the next week or two? And it may be following up with somebody from the panel. It may be showing up somewhere. It may be doing some research around some language you heard tonight that you know you have some education to do. Our leadership team may need to like get together and reevaluate what are we doing with our space. I think this has been such a good conversation. And my hope also for all of us is that it doesn't end here, that you don't like, well, I went to this one open house and therefore I'm woke. Stay engaged in dialogue, but really encourage you to think through what is one action step you can take in the next week or two to engage in this further, and then to actually follow up on that. One of the ways that I hold myself accountable to following up on action steps, I tell somebody else. And then they go like, so, Stephen, you had this action step. How did you do? What do you mean? Right? So think about an action step, and then maybe be brave enough to share that action step with somebody else. Thank you both for being willing to come up and share. We value your voice so much. Can't express it enough. Thank you to panelists, Dylan for sharing your story, Debbie for helping with some of the history of what got us to this point, and Tex, and even just for this church, the leadership team who sort of approved the idea of hosting these Justice and Mercy Talks, the many people who did work on this building and this space around before I ever got here. I can't pretend this has anything to do with me. I get the privilege of showing up and sort of just helping be a part of this season. So thank you guys for tolerating me as well. There are snacks and stuff. Linger for a while, have conversations. Be blessed as you go.